India has just partnered with Russia in one of the biggest moves away from using the US dollar that we've seen. If you haven't been paying attention to the BRICS nations and their shift from the dollar, now's the time to start. Today at Economy Obsession, we'll look into several global trends and explore what this means for the future of the US dollar. It all kicked off a few weeks ago when India's Prime Minister, Modi, went to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin. The two leaders discussed the trade between two countries, which hit $65 billion last year. This was a whopping 33% increase from the year before. India has also recently emerged as the leading buyer of Russian oil with a staggering increase in its purchases, up to 1,800% since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. This surge is particularly significant given the backdrop of international relations, while the US and its allies have levied over 16,000 sanctions against Russia. More than 85% of the world has not signed onto these sanctions. Russia, in response, has been adept at finding creative ways to bypass these restrictions, with the partnership with India being a prime example. By buying more Russian oil and setting up a new payment system that avoids the US dollar, India is not just sidestepping sanctions but also setting a trend for others to follow. This new system allows them to do business directly using their own currencies, making transactions smoother and less reliant on the dollar. During a recent meeting, Putin and Modi set a bold goal. They want to increase trade between their countries to $100 billion by 2030. This agreement is a clear signal to the world that they're serious about building a new economic alliance within the BRICS group, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia as well. By creating alternatives to the dollar for international trade, Russia and India are not only protecting their economies against sanctions, but also leading a shift toward a world where economic power is more spread out. This move undermines the sanctions' impact and hints at a changing global economic landscape where the US dollar isn't the only currency calling the shots. Moreover, this shift away from the dollar has benefited another asset: gold. BRICS countries have been increasing their gold reserves at a rate faster than the rest of the world since 2018. Looking ahead, a third of all central banks globally are planning to further boost their gold reserves in 2024, reflecting a strategic shift towards more stable and tangible assets amidst the fluctuating dynamics of international finance. In the past 12 months, CIPS, China International Payment System, has added 62 new members, bringing its total to over 1,500 participants worldwide. This system gives these countries a way to trade without having to rely on the US dollar and avoids the US-controlled SWIFT banking system. This change is part of a larger trend where countries are moving away from the US dollar because of its strict rules. Recently, there was big news from Guangdong, China. They've started the first real trade service using China's central bank digital currency. This is a big step forward for the future of the BRICS nations and shows that China is way ahead in developing digital money. Experts think China is about 10 years ahead of the United States in this area. Even though the US dollar is still the main currency worldwide, the US hasn't been very interested in creating its own digital currency. Meanwhile, China is pushing ahead, hoping that their work on digital currencies will pay off, just like their early investments in electric vehicles did about 25 years ago. This effort by China could really change how global finances work and challenge the dominance of the US dollar. In the past 2 decades, China has skyrocketed from a newcomer to the most dominant force in the electric vehicle industry globally. Now their digital currency is set to further revolutionize the scene. It's not just about cutting transaction costs and boosting the efficiency of cross-border payments. This digital currency could become a crucial technology for future trade among BRICS nations. But here's where it gets even more interesting. 2 weeks ago, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, updated its World Economic Outlook, and the latest forecasts for BRICS countries might surprise you. The IMF has raised its growth projections for China and India to 5% and 7% respectively, while the United States is the only G7 country expected to see growth above 1%. The entire Eurozone is projected to grow by just 0.9%, with Germany, often seen as Europe's economic powerhouse, expected to have the lowest growth rate of any developed nation at just 0.2%. This is a stark contrast to the 6 BRICS members, which are predicted to see some of the strongest growth rates for the remainder of 2024. This perspective was further detailed in a New York Times article, which also noted a cooling in the U.S. economy ahead. It's refreshing to see such candid reporting, especially since the prevailing narrative for most of the year has been about China's economy teetering on the edge of collapse due to weak consumer spending and a soft job market. Descriptions that, according to the IMF, now apply more accurately to the U.S. economy. The IMF now views Asia's emerging markets as the primary drivers of the global economy, with growth in China and India making up nearly half of all global growth. The reality in the U.S. is challenging. Inflation remains a significant problem. The national debt is soaring at an unprecedented rate of nearly $1 trillion every 100 days, and there's a high level of political uncertainty. As a result, more and more countries are losing faith in the American political system. The U.S. is no longer viewed as the shiny example of democracy it once was. Even some of America's closest allies like Germany, Great Britain, and Canada are expressing doubts, with nearly a quarter of Brits and Germans believing the U.S. has never been a good example of democracy. The race for the U.S. presidency not only captures attention within the country, but also has significant global implications. According to a recent IMF report, this year's elections could lead to major shifts in economic policy, creating more uncertainty and potentially negative impacts worldwide. For instance, Trump initially imposed tariffs on Chinese goods in 2016, and Biden expanded those in 2020. Recently, Bloomberg reported that a new 60% tariff on Chinese goods might be imposed if Trump returns to the White House. However, analysts may not have fully captured the situation. U.S. tariffs have had little impact on China's exports. China has simply shifted its focus to producing more for countries in the global south, resulting in a significant increase in their export share over the past few years. Imposing further tariffs on Chinese goods would likely harm American consumers more than China. Interestingly, despite the talk of tariffs, Trump recently suggested welcoming Chinese EV manufacturers to the U.S. to cater to American consumers. The evolving partnership between Russia and India is proving to be a major factor in the shift away from U.S. dollar dependency in global markets. By dramatically increasing its purchase of Russian oil and collaborating on a new payment system to facilitate trade directly in their own currencies, India is not just bypassing U.S. sanctions, but also paving the way for a deeper economic alignment with Russia. This strategic alliance is set to significantly influence global trade dynamics, potentially diminishing the dollar's role in international transactions. As Russia and India aim for a $100 billion trade target by 2030, they are not only reinforcing their bilateral ties, but also setting a precedent for other nations to follow. This partnership underscores a broader movement within the BRICS nations and beyond, towards creating a multi-currency global economy. The significance of this development extends beyond mere economics, signaling a shift in geopolitical power and hinting at a new era of international relations where the US dollar no longer holds undisputed dominance.